Everyone, and welcome to today's session, a guide to starting your impact measurement journey, hosted by Social Suite. Really thank everyone for joining today's session. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get going. Everyone will notice that there's a bit of a chat bot on the right-hand side. Feel free to post any questions. We'll leave a bit of time at the end for the Q&A, but if there's any specific questions as we're going through, feel free to enter them in there as well. It's also where a couple of polls we'll put up just to give us an insight as to where organizations are at on their journey, what some of the drivers are, just so we can help tailor that content as well. I think we've got quite a few people joining us from all over the world. So yeah, I'm based in Melbourne myself, and we've also got Hadil, who's based in Vancouver. So yeah, it'd be really good just to understand where people are dialing in from. So feel free to enter into the chat where you're dialing in from. But just to kick things off, I'm just going to put a poll up on the right-hand side as well. And it'd be good just to understand sort of where people are at sort of on their impact journey. So you notice there's a poll down the right-hand side, whether people are currently aligning internally and sort of gaining that exec approval, whether they're just educating themselves around impact measurement, or whether organizations are actually currently already measuring outcomes as well. So yeah, just as those sort of responses come in, just a bit of an agenda. So we'll give you a bit of an introduction to Social Suite. We'll go through, or Hadil will talk through the impact measurement process. Obviously, it can be quite a complex space and sector, so hopefully we can kind of distill and simplify the process for organizations so you can get some really key takeaways to help you on your journey. And then we'll kind of go through the Social Suite platform and solution and sort of focus quite a bit on the end reporting and how that data is used and how the reports can be extracted. And as I said before, we'll open it up for questions and answers. So as you can see, just the polls on the right-hand side, majority of people are already measuring outcomes. So yeah, hopefully we can provide some good insights as to how that can help you on a more advanced journey. As way of introduction, my name is Tom Latimer. I'm head of business development here at Social Suite, been with the organization now for touching 4 years. Also joined by Hadil Al-Ashwal, who I said was based in Vancouver, who is an impact coach here at Social Suite and has got a wealth of knowledge and experience of helping organizations through the whole process from developing a theory of change and outcomes framework right up through until embedding that in the organization and then how to effectively utilize that data as well. A bit about Social Suite for those organizations that are joining us for the first time. We are a coaching and technology organization. We've been around for about 9 years now. We've had the privilege of working primarily with nonprofit organizations around the world, and in excess of 1,200 organizations that we've been able to help. And that could be some of the smaller grassroots organizations that really need to streamline their impact measurement processes because they have limited resources, right up until some of the largest globally, like Habitat for Humanity, sort of Prince's Trust, and YMCAs of the world as well. So just before I do hand across to Hadil, I just got one more quick poll that I would like to share. So obviously there's many drivers as to why organizations are currently measuring or know they need to measure outcomes-based evidence, but it'd be good just to understand what is the primary driver within your organization, whether it's to gain the transparency to improve programs or services, whether it's to help secure funding, as we know that grant applications, a lot of current funders are starting to request this type of evidence, whether you want to be able to share it with the staff and the frontline staff, or whether it's more to share with the beneficiaries so they can see their journey. But just as those answers are coming in, it's quite interesting. So majority of people, to improve programs and services, which, in theory, that's exactly why organizations should be measuring outcomes-based evidence to understand and gain that transparency to really drive the best outcomes for the beneficiaries as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand across to Hadil.
Thank you so much for that, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, we're going to be talking about the impact measurement process and how we are helping different organizations through Social Suite in that specific part. So this is the answer that we usually provide different organizations through Social Suite, which is what is the social impact that your organization's interventions are making, and how you can improve. And it's great that I'm seeing here already that a lot of these organizations that are joining us today are working on improving their programs and services, and hopefully are trying to do that through impact measurement. And this can definitely help in different ways. So it can help in having more funders, and as well as proving for your current funders that the work that you're doing is actually making an impact. So how do we help different organizations do that? To answer this question, let's take a few steps back and ask this question. How can we measure a social impact? How can we, in terms of a social change that we're trying to make, measure something that is such a complicated thing? And why is it complicated? So for me to be able to measure a social impact, I need to have these 4 different things. The first thing would be data. I need to have information about what is exactly the change that I'm making. So I need to collect data, qualitative and quantitative data. And then the second thing that I need, because it's social change, because it's something that doesn't change over one night, I need to collect this data over time. And then the third thing, for me to have this comprehensive information and data, I need to be able, in many cases, this may not be the case for your organization or for some of the programs, but in many cases, I may want to collect this data from different stakeholders. So for example, if I have this leadership program, I may want to know what my participants think about this program and how it changed them over time, measuring the change that this is making, as well as what the coaches that are within this leadership program think about these participants, so that I can have this really clear view of how things are changing. And all these things need to be built based on my outcome framework. And basically, this means all these things need to be built based on the results that I'm trying to achieve for my organization as a whole and for the programs that I have. So as you might have noticed, this is very complicated and it's very complex, because it's not just one layer. It's not just that me trying to collect data and I have this one survey and see what are the responses that my participants thought about it. It's something that is a lot more complicated than that when it comes to social impact. So what we do at Social Suite is exactly what Tom said: simplify it, have it as one full process. And how do we do that? Let's take an example. So going back to that leadership example, I have this program that is trying to help different participants in improving their leadership skills. So I want to know if I'm actually supporting these participants in improving their leadership skills. So how do I do that through Social Suite? Thinking about the level of impact measurement and thinking about how this is generally done in terms of impact measurement, this can be done through different levels. So the first thing, if I have this program, this leadership program, I may decide not to even measure how I'm doing. So this is the first level, which is basically not knowing exactly how I'm doing, not knowing anything about how I am progressing, and if there is any change that I need to make when it comes to the input of my program and the resources. And the second part is the retrospective assessment, which is basically trying to know how things went after providing the program, so that I can see, what the participants thought of that. And the third part, which is a bit more comprehensive, but still not giving me all the information and still very complex, I can ask my participants before the leadership program, during the leadership program, and then maybe 6 months after the leadership program, on paper-based survey and spreadsheets. And this can be a nightmare, because I have all these paper sheets and I just provide these paper sheets after during different timings. I cannot remember when I should send them these or give them these paper sheets, and I don't know actually if this person that I am surveying is the exact same person that I surveyed at a different time point. And I may even lose some of these paper surveys and add all this to this spreadsheet that can be very complex. And then the fourth type, which is starting to use technology and using some of the survey tools that are not really designed for impact measurement, like, for example, SurveyMonkey. Especially when it comes to impact measurement, as mentioned, it's really important to see at different time points how the change is happening. So when it comes to different survey tools that are not designed to measure impact, it's really hard to actually measure that impact, because especially if I want to know this at different time points, because I cannot schedule it at different time points, I cannot see for that specific person or for that specific group how this is changing. I just see it for everyone. And also, it's really complicated for me to start then linking all this to my outcomes and my indicators, linking all this to the way that I'm trying to measure the results that I'm trying to achieve. And then if I want to really start measuring my impact in a way that's giving me a great perspective about what is the change that I'm making, if I need to improve, or if there are things that I'm doing great and I just need to continue doing, is basically trying to measure this at different time points when I'm timing this, where I know for this specific beneficiary what the responses are for a certain survey at different time points and how they are changing in these different time points. And not only that, but also linking it to the results that I'm trying to achieve. So for example, for the leadership skills program, I may want to have as one of my outcomes having this improved teamwork skills. And so how can I know if this specific person or this specific group within my program have really improved in terms of that specific skill? If I have this real-time monitoring where I'm sending these surveys, these purposeful surveys that are built based on my outcomes at different time points, scheduled in these different time points that are built based on my outcomes. And I'm able then to visualize them in a really easy way where I can show my team what are the great things that we've been doing, what are the things that we can improve, and what are the things that we need to change, and also show potential funders what are the things that we've been doing great, and prove for them that we are really doing a great job. And so thinking about Social Suite and how we measure impact through Social Suite, this is how you can measure impact through Social Suite. So you think about your program input, you look into the resources that you have, and then within Social Suite, you can measure different things. You can measure your long-term outcome, which is something that we'll be talking about, which is how you can leverage Social Suite in the best way possible. But you can also just look into the program outputs and start looking into what are the outputs that you're getting from a certain program. So within Social Suite, you can go a lot deeper, but you can start also from the program outputs if you would like to. So you can measure your program outputs and then start looking into your initial outcomes. So start thinking about, okay, the outputs of this program, going back to the same example, the leadership program is, we have trained 100 people. And then thinking about the initial outcome is them knowing more about what makes a great leader. And the midterm outcome is them really starting to have more leadership rules. And then longer term outcome, it can be my participants making a great impact as leaders in my society. So thinking about all these outcomes and thinking about the output that I wanted to achieve and how you can really link all this together within Social Suite is one of the ways where you can think through what are the benefits of trying to use a system that is designed for impact measurement. Now, looking into exactly the main three things that you can do through Social Suite. So the first thing you can do through Social Suite is the questions, the purposeful questions. And we're calling this the library of expert designed outcome maps, because you already have within Social Suite a library that has outcomes, indicators that are linked to these outcomes, which means ways to measure these outcomes or these results that you're trying to achieve, and then questions. So you already have these outcomes and indicators and questions that are out there that have been designed by experts and academically rigorous templates as well. So you can start looking into them and see which one of these outcomes and indicators and questions you may want to use, but also design your own templates based on your own outcomes and indicators and questions, and we will talk a bit more about that, so that you can have your own library, your own outcome framework within Social Suite that you can use to different programs, to the different programs that you have. So you have all these purposeful design surveys within Social Suite that you can use over time. And then the second part is the data collection part. So then you start within Social Suite collecting data through different means, including URL and mobile data. And then the third part is actually being able to visualize all this great work that you've been doing in real time in a dashboard. So you start looking into these insights as in, oh, okay, these three main outcomes that I'm trying to achieve, how am I doing in terms of that? And over time, how this is changing, because we start developing your dashboard, and then over time you continue collecting data, and you can see over time how your respondents, how your beneficiaries' responses are changing, and based on that you can make informed decisions. And Tom is going to be talking a bit more about that part. So you can start looking into the visualization part of Social Suite as well. So digging deeper into the library part and how you can design surveys within Social Suite that are purposeful, as in built based on your outcome framework. So this is just an example, going back to, again, our leadership program. How this is all designed, think about it as in, what is the main thing that you're trying to achieve, which we can call as an outcome category, or the theme of my outcome. So for this case, as an example, we have our outcome category is making a contribution to the community. And so the outcome of this outcome category is building teamwork skills. So I want my participants in this leadership skills program to improve their teamwork skills. And so how am I going to know if they actually were able to improve their teamwork skills? I have decided to make my indicator, or the way that I'm measuring this, through knowing the percentage of participants that are actually participating in a group activity. So that's the indicator, or the way that I'm measuring it. And so then, only then, I start thinking about what is the question that is going to help me know if I am actually able to help them improve their percentage of participation in a group activity. So one question can be asking my participants, and also if we're doing the 360 view, asking the coaches of this program, how often do you participate in a group activity? So my participants will respond to this questionnaire, and based on their responses, I will know what is their level. I can ask this specific question or other questions in pre the program, so before the leadership skills program. So I see what is their responses. I can see for a specific person what is the response of Sam's. So Sam, for example, response is sometimes. And then if I ask the same question during the program and then after the program, and I see during the program it has increased to often, and then after the program it has increased to very often. And so I know that my intervention, this specific program, has really helped me. There is an indication that is helping me know that actually Sam has increased his participation in group activity, which means he has built his teamwork skills because of this program. And if I see there isn't as much change, I can think about what are the things that can help me improve. And just to highlight that you can have as many outcomes as you want, and you can link a specific outcome to as many indicators as you want, and a specific indicator to as many questions as you want. so that you can have several questions that are helping you know exactly how to measure a specific outcome. So because of that, because the way that Social Suite is designed is based on outcome framework, what we do within Social Suite is not that we only offer a software, but we also offer coaching. So because everything is built based on outcome framework, we make sure that you're ready to start measuring your outcomes. And how do we make sure that you're ready to start measuring your outcomes? Through our trainings that I will be talking about in a bit. And then we provide you with the software. Once, well, you're provided with the software from the time you decide to work with Social Suite, but then we know when you're ready to start collecting the data through the use of Social Suite, and then we help you utilize Social Suite in the best way possible, so that you start actually collecting data in months rather than years. So talking about our onboarding roadmap and talking about how we actually do that, how we actually help you start collecting data, how do we know that you are actually now ready to start collecting data? The way we do it is, first step we do is do this impact assessment. So basically, once we start working with you, or once we start our engagement with you, we send you an impact assessment to know what level you're at when it comes to impact measurement, so that we know how we can tailor our training and support to you, or coaching and support to you. And then based on that, we put you at a specific stage and we provide you with the right materials and the right coaching so that you can start collecting data. So I'll talk about each of these stages. So each customer may start at a different stage, but the first stage that a customer may be in would be the clarity of the big picture stage. And the clarity of the big picture stage is the stage where you're still trying to understand what are the main outcomes that you want to have for your programs or program, and how you're trying to measure it. So if you're still at this stage, we help you through navigating this part. And then the second stage is the data collection strategy stage, which is the stage where basically we help our clients design their data collection strategy, as in what is the plan that they have for this specific program, when they're going to be collecting the data, what exactly they're trying to collect, from whom they're going to be collecting the data, and how they're going to be collecting the data. As in, for example, is it going to be via email? Is it going to be via SMS? And we have within Social Suite different tools or different ways or methods that you can use to collect the data. And the fourth part is the impact survey design. So once you have identified all your outcomes and indicators, and also have identified actually what is the data collection strategy that you want to use, this is the time when we start designing the questions that we want to ask, that are purposefully built based on my outcomes and indicators, that are going to help me answer my questions if I'm actually achieving these outcomes that I'm trying to achieve. And again, we provide you with all the support to help you finalize this stage. And then utilizing actually the data collection part, where we help you in utilizing Social Suite, where we train you on how to start your measurement project within Social Suite, and immediately afterwards start collecting data. And of course, before that, you can start doing some testings, and within your team start looking into how you want to the survey to look like, and if everything looks great, then you start collecting the data. And finally, we always provide ongoing impact reporting support. So that's not it. So once a customer start collecting data for a specific activity, we continue our follow-up to make sure that they're working through Social Suite and utilizing it in the best way possible. We try to support our clients and share the great work that they're doing, so that more and more organizations know about the impact that they're making. And so these are all the steps that we walk our customers through to ensure that they have their framework that is actually helping them in measuring their data, where they are actually knowing exactly what is the work that they are inputting and what is the result of that work. So now I'm gonna be handing this over to my colleague Tom, where he's gonna give you more visualization on that. He's gonna give you the product demo so that you can see a bit more of Social Suite. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Hadil. So yeah, I guess just in summary, what we see from a lot of organizations is using disparate tools and systems in order to measure impact. And as Hadil said, that it's not as simple as that, because the response from the question that you're asking has to tie back to the outcomes framework. It has to tie back to the individual, has to tie back to the program or service, and to do longitudinally, it obviously has to tie back to that specific time point. So doing that using a survey tool, having to extract that data, generally using Excel spreadsheets and mapping all that together, is quite a time-consuming process. So I guess I'll just go through Social Suite at a bit of a high level, but just showing you how it's tagged in the relevant way to then ensure that your reporting is going to be structured in a way that's effective for reporting to donors, but also utilizing internally, frontline staff, etc. as well. So the first thing really is about embedding the outcomes framework. So obviously there's a lot of organizations on this call that are currently measuring outcomes. So you've obviously got an outcomes framework. We can embed that into the library for you. Or as I said, if an organization hasn't developed an outcomes framework, we can help you develop that. But also there's a lot of other academic frameworks that are widely used that sit within the library that you can essentially apply to one or multiple things that you want to measure within the organization. So something particular within Australia that's quite widely used is the Personal Wellbeing Index. So if we look at how that's structured from a Social Suite perspective, it's going to, okay, well, what is the end outcome that we're trying to achieve for that beneficiary? What is the indicator? And then what is the question that ties and feeds into that outcome? So the question is just going to form the basis of the survey, but then it's going to map back to the outcomes framework automatically. What you can then do is start to segregate the different programs and sub-programs that you want to measure within the organization. Again, so from a reporting perspective, you're able to get program to program, like potentially workshop to workshop comparison. So you can set up what is an overarching program. You can start to put anything like funding, any other inputs like staffing hours, etc. So you can look at the impact in relation to the funding amount as well. But you can then see, you can segregate the program further down into activities or sub-programs that you might be running. So as I said, that could be different workshops or whatever it may be. And then you can segregate further into groups or cohorts of individuals. So we've just done suburbs surrounding Melbourne, but you could define that as intake groups, classes, depending on your organization. Again, it's just a way of segregating different people going through your program when we get to that reporting perspective. But one thing that Social Suite can do, so yes, we're using a survey mechanism, but the responses are going to tie back to the outcomes that we're measuring. So we can see what is the outcome or what are the questions that feed into the outcome. We can then start to automate a lot of that data collection. So again, using a survey tool, you're having to remind yourself at each time point to collect that data. You can start to automate that. So we've got a pre-program, post-program, 6, 12, 24-month follow-up. Again, this is all customizable depending on your sort of program logics that have been developed. Who are you collecting data from? Is it just the beneficiary of the program? Or do you want to start to capture data from a parent, a teacher, a frontline worker to gain another perspective and start to look at the data from more of a holistic view? But then there's multiple different ways of actually capturing that data. So you can send it straight to somebody's email address because you've got their contact information, send it to them via SMS. If it's face-to-face, you can use QR codes and mobile app to capture it. So different ways of being able to capture that data. But if you can imagine, if you've got multiple programs, different time points of collecting data, and then just trying to bring all that together, because Social Suite's tagging it relevantly within the backend structure, it means then from an analytics or dashboard perspective that you're able to really slice and dice that data at different levels. So we'll go through a few different examples. All of these dashboards are all customizable. And as Hadil touched on, in the onboarding process, we actually workshop organizations' requirements with them to understand, what is the story they're trying to tell? Is there any funding requirements that need to be met? What demographics do you want to be able to slice and dice that data? And there's 50 odd different ways of representing and visualizing the data. So then we go off and actually build the dashboard for the organization as well. So if you look at this example, this is a youth program. We can see the different cohorts of different high schools that we've selected here. we're using the personal wellbeing index as the measurement framework from the library across this particular program. And what we can see across those 7 outcome life domains, what has been the positive change from pre to post in line with those outcomes. We can then start to go, okay, we want to look at that for this particular group of people, and we'll, how does it compare to this group of people? So you can start to, again, use that data structure to slice and dice. So we might want to then go, okay, within this particular school, we want to look at people that were aged between, 12 to 15, how they compare to 16 to 18 as an example. What we can also do as well is start to bring in external data sets that then make the data that you've collected through Social Suite a bit more meaningful. So again, it's not necessarily just the outcome data collected through surveys that tells the full story. There could be qualitative responses you've captured. There could be output-based information, but also there could be a third-party data set from other systems or government data that helps tell that wider story. So if we look at the data that we've collected, it gives an average program well-being of the participants through those particular programs. But what we've also done is embed an external data set called the Happy Planet Index. Essentially, that gives you things like average life expectancy, happy life years. So if you look in Australia, where I think majority of people are down in from, apparently we're going to live 53 happy life years, but it also gives an average well-being of people within that particular vicinity. And then we can benchmark that against that particular data. So we've got quite a few mental health-based service organizations that there's plenty of government-based data that they can benchmark against as well. So that's one example. I think the next example is being able to bring in the output information, but then also start to look at this data from a geographical lens. So essentially what we can see here is we're pulling the output data, so people reached, dollars deployed, total investment, volunteering hours, etc. But then we brought that in line with the outcomes that we're trying to measure. So if we look at the first outcome here, it's people have experienced prejudice against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders within the workplace across a 3-month period. So essentially we're capturing every 3 months from these people. And we can see from a very, very high level since 2015, effectively 25% or 1 in 4 are experiencing that. I'll throw the disclaimer out, this is dummy data as well. But then you can also see how that changes and trends from a time-bound perspective, so year to year. But then we can start to use different demographics. So when we've captured the data against those individuals, we've captured things like what sector do they work in, where is their postcode, people in the US, zip code. And then we can start to look at that data from that geographical lens. So we can say, okay, well, let's have a look at this data in Victoria. And then we might want to cross-section that with, what sector do they work within as well. So we can see, how is prejudice in the workplace, in the education sector within this specific region in comparison to this specific sector within that particular region. So again, we work with organizations to define what are these demographic splits that you want to visualize this data by. But it can really provide some granular insights. And any of these dashboards, you can just provide as a PDF. You can start to, you don't need to necessarily get designers to design a report. It can come out of Social Suite as you can provide that to funders, to the board, which is not only efficient, but it also is quite cost-saving for organizations, not having to use designers as well. I'll go through a couple more, and then we can open it up for some questions. This is an example of a mentoring program. This is quite an effective one because you can see the data from a mentee's perspective, but as we touched on earlier, you can also capture data from another person's perspective and start to then bring that data in line. So again, very, very high level, we can drill down to cohorts, which in this case is major cities. We can even drill down to the individual participant level. The first outcome is looking around confidence. So people's confidence in applying for leadership roles. 17% felt confident pre-program. 3 months in, 75% felt confident. But then what is it from the mentor's perspective? So they felt that 13% were confident pre-program and 72% confidence 3 months in. And then you can start to tie that into, okay, well, we can see after 3 months that 86% of mentees actually end up applying for a leadership or management role. So that ties in quite nicely to the confidence change from that perspective as well. So the final one I'll show you is actually a real life example. Again, it's dummy data, so they're completely fine with us showing this. But it's an organization we've worked with for a number of years called Scope. Australia. So essentially they're a large disability services provider, run a range of different programs. They have funding from government, philanthropic, quite an active board from an outcomes and impact perspective, but also have a research team internally where they really want to improve program and service delivery. So being able to gain some really valuable insights is key to fuel those discussions. So they've developed a framework called MESA. It just stands for Measuring Impact of Service Outcomes. Essentially, it's a survey with 9 questions. Each question ties back to an overarching life domain. The questions are a Likert scale from 1 to 5. So they're asking that data across a lot of their services and programs. So when you aggregate that data, so what we're viewing here is across all programs, all services, all time points, from a Likert scale of -2 to +2, how are we going in relation to these different life domains? So the board particularly like to see this every 3 months. So what they can do is go, okay, we can set that particular 3-month period, we can extract that as the PDF, and then we can send that to the board. So really straightforward. They also then have specific philanthropic funders that fund, I'm going to say the word again, specific programs. So they can say, okay, well, we need to report to them every 6 months. So they fund the cooking inclusion program. We'll set that 6-month period, and then we can provide that to our philanthropists as well. But also internally, they want to look at how are people being affected in relation to these life domains via things like different disability types. So how are people with acquired brain injury going in comparison to people with an intellectual disability, or people that are living alone or supported accommodation, supported residence, people's education level, state they live in, and also custom age, gender, and whether they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander or not as well. So again, it's because it's structured against the data when you're collecting it through the form of a survey, is against the individual, against the program of service, against the demographics, against the time point, as to why when you get to this perspective, you're able just to click of a button, change the parameters, and extract the data that's needed, which is pretty effective as well. So I just sort of stop there, and I think I'll probably just open that up to any questions that people may have. Feel free to pop anything in the chat function. If not, then we can end it there. No questions. No questions going through. We'll be sending the recording out. Okay, so Charles is about to ask a question, I believe. But I was just going to say that we'll be sending the recording out of this as well. Okay, so Justine's asking, where is the data stored? So Social Suite's actually built on Salesforce, which means we leverage all of their data security aspect, which is fantastic. The default server for Salesforce actually defaults for APAC in Japan, but we've worked with a lot of organizations where they have to store that within Australia. So what we can do is just get Salesforce to transfer the org or the instance. So the data is housed on the AWS server in Sydney. Solana is asking, could you give an approximate price on using a tool for a startup program? There's a few different line items. It's based on number of licenses, but also there's an element of the impact coach as well. So it can range for an organization, but we'll reach out to you, Lana, and just find out a bit more information of the use case so we can provide some costings as well. Laura's asked, does this work with longer term data when our programs look at change over years? Yeah, 100%, Laura. So when we work with organizations, sometimes they have a lot of legacy data from could be 5-10 years in the past. So, we can absorb that information into Social Suite, and then the data that's collected moving forward is just adding on to that longitudinally. So because you've got that database and data repository, that 100% right, that you can then start to look at that data year on year change. So particularly what some of our organizations have found that useful for is when they've just had 12-month funding, is they've developed like a 3-year data set and then gone to funders and gone, okay, well, this is the impact for 3 years, and actually been able to get longer term grants and funding off the back of that as well. So Charles, we work with a number of communities. We develop strategic plans for communities in EU and around the world. We are non-profit. Our communities are NFP. I'm not too sure if that's a question. Or there might be a second part to that, Charles. So Justine, can we export the raw data? 100%. You can. The data's yours. We don't have access to that data. You can extract that at any point in time as well. So Brenda, a critical point seems to be having a good survey applied with a representative sample. What happens if you have some not so representative data? Can you flag it somehow? So I'm assuming what you mean by that is in terms of responses that have come back and somebody's answered 1 million to a question where most answers come back between 1 and 10. So you can actually put barriers on the survey to say, okay, well, this is going to be a numeric value and this has got to be a numeric value between this and this, which can help it. But you can check the data that comes in to see if there's any sort of wild sort of responses in there as well. So Brenda again, can you link to different data collection tools? How about etc? You can, when you look at linking different data collection tools, yes, it's possible, but again, you just bring in that data in as a large data set from a survey tool. You then still got to map it back to the program of service, the individual, the different demographics and the time point. So yes, you can, but I guess you're bypassing a lot of the value of Social Suite's survey functionality, because as I said, that's going to connect to everything in the back end, so your reporting is effective. Saga, does data collected for an individual organization get recycled into any further data used across the platform for other organizations? Good question. It doesn't. So the data that's collected is your data. It doesn't get accessed by anybody else or visualized by anybody else unless you provide access to someone to log in and look at your data. What we are starting to see, though, is if you take Scope with the MISO framework, that framework has been adopted by other disability services organizations. So in theory, over time, you could start to have a benchmarkable anonymized data set, or I mean, you can make it identified if you would want. So it's definitely possible within the solution, but it depends on the organization and what they're comfortable with, really. But we are starting to see more collaboration within sectors, particularly housing, community housing sector. Yeah, sort of childcare as well, starting to see some collaboration across that. Yeah, Charles, I know you've touched on the pricing. Again, it can vary depending on use cases and licensing. So we'll reach out, just ask a couple of questions and scope that a bit further and be able to provide you an accurate cost from that perspective. Okay, fantastic. If there's no other questions, as I say, really thank everyone for the time. It seems like people were dialed in, getting up early from Indonesia and staying late in the US. So really do appreciate everyone's time. Do you engage with client online or on ground? It depends where people are located. We have offices in Melbourne, Texas, Vancouver. So again, if it's, and even Sydney as well. So if it's possible, then we welcome that. We engage people to come into our offices. But generally it's all done online. Justine, is the support through Salesforce or Social Suite? The support is through Social Suite. We have large expertise from both a Salesforce Social Suite perspective, but also an impact lens as well. So it's all done through Social Suite. And is that 24/7? It's not 24/7. We respond to people within 24 hours. We're pretty responsive if you just want to pick up the phone, especially inside either Vancouver US times or inside Australia times. But yeah, it's not 24/7, unfortunately. But we do have an online academy, so depending on what type of support it is, like people can just access the online academy as the first line of support as well. But I think we'll end it there. I thank everyone for the time, and we'll send out the recording. If anybody's got any questions, feel free reach out. But yeah, we're trying to do this on a regular cadence. So if anyone's got any suggestions as to who they would like to hear from, we're trying to get more clients involved to tell their story as well. So yeah, look out for the invite next month in October. Thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world. See you later.